Well, that's when you'll learn God doesn't exist. But no morals, no quarrels, with the flick of the wrist. 'Cause you're smarter these days, it's as clear as a bell. Nothing can stop you if there's no place called hell. It's the Lyrical Wax. Those were the lyrics. Written by me, PurpleZain of the PurpleZain Group, from our most recent 2024 EP, The Lamb and the Beast. An EP that's actually a concept album about the downfall of Tim Lambesis, the singer and founder of Christmas, it's coming close to Christmas, the lead singer of Christian metal band As I Lay Dying. Why have I decided to write lyrics about this guy, and what do those lyrics mean? Well, Tim Lambesis is pretty famous. As I Lay Dying are pretty famous. They were nominated for a Grammy 10 years ago. But if you don't know metalcore, there's a chance you would have no idea who this guy is. Tim Lambesis was a Christian goody two-shoes metalcore singer during the big wave of the Christian hardcore metalcore explosion. It happened about 15 or so years ago. But he sort of lost his marbles, He really lost his marbles. Divorced his wife, had all these issues with his kids, and he thought the only way he's going to get himself out of this trouble is to hire a hitman to kill his wife. Now, the funny thing is the hitman was actually an undercover cop. So when he paid the hitman to, take his wife out, he was subsequently arrested and went to prison for quite a few years. He's out now. He's been out of prison for several years, but he's kind of back in the news as well because there's all these new sort of allegations, definitely I'll say allegations from his new current wife, now to be ex-wife, I suppose, around domestic violence issues and so on. I'm not going to speculate on that because that's all sort of allegations at the moment and hearsay, but when you've definitely been proven guilty of hiring a hitman to kill your wife 10 years ago, and these things come up again, it never looks good, does it? Again, innocent till proven guilty, but goddamn, people are going to judge, aren't they? People are going to judge. So yes, let's see what comes of these new allegations. I'm really laughing at someone's misery, and it's not really my style, but I'll tell you what, I'm glad I'm not Tim Lambesis and I'm me, Zane Constantine. So yes, my name's PurpleZain, Zane Constantine in real life. I run the PurpleZain Group. I run sort of kind of easy peasy entertainment. So I've done a bit of mixing and producing and songwriting and all this sort of stuff for different people. But I never make any money out of easy peasy entertainment. How I make my money is I'm actually the principal psychologist for Chill Psychology based out of Tweed Heads. So yes, I am actually a registered psychologist. If you've been following the Lyrical Wax podcast or you've been sort of following my socials, you probably know this by now. But yeah, so I started up the Lyrical Wax podcast. It's a little bit of a way to explore people's lyrics because I just like doing it as a fan of music. But it's sort of like throw in a little bit of the psychological principles that I'm aware of. And to be honest, I'd like to think people find them interesting, trying to apply them to the lyrics of their songs. Now, the thing is, this Lyrical Wax podcast is going to be a little bit different because it's about me. I'm totally self-indulgent and want to make it about myself. But because Tim Lambesis is back in the news, and it was something I thought, might as well do it. I might as well do this for one of my own songs. I've done 10 or so episodes, so why not? Let me self-stroke my ego and see what comes of it. But hopefully, maybe people will find it interesting in the same way that the other Lyrical Wax episodes have been interesting. And I kind of like storytelling, and the story of Tim Lambesis' downfall from, again, Christian goody two-shoes poster child to convicted felon who hired a hitman to kill his wife. It's just such an incredible, fascinating story. And I'm kind of glad I wrote a song about it, well, like an EP about it. It's actually one 12.5-minute song, but I broke it into 4 parts because I was worried no one would listen to all 12 minutes of it in one go. So I divided it into 4 parts. It's more likely, people are more likely to listen to it. So yes, I've got a lot of notes here, but I'm just rambling off the top of my head. But, we talk about descent into madness stories. I just love it. The Shining, Fight Club, American Psycho, Anakin Skywalker is a descent into madness story, isn't it? Pink Floyd's The Wall is a descent into madness story. So, Tim Lambesis' story is kind of the same, and it's true. It's a true story. It's a true story. So a few little notes on it before I get going. I will actually go to my notes now rather than just rambling away. So the lyrics were written from he was sort of prosecuted in 2014, and he was awaiting sentencing. So he did a huge interview with Alternative Press magazine, and he gave it when he'd been found guilty, but he was awaiting sentencing. So the interview wasn't actually released until after his sentencing. So it's kind of an interesting time. If he had done that, there's lots of interviews with him now on podcasts and stuff, and he's a little bit more open and taking a little bit more responsibility. But I read this interview 10 years ago, and I was just like, wow, this is such a crazy interview, And I always love these sort of stories and rock operas and stuff. I'd written a couple of rock operas already. So I thought, I'm copying and pasting and saving this. And the full interview isn't available on the Alternative Press website now. But I have it copied and pasted and saved as a PDF. So if you want to read the full interview, it's super fascinating. It's super long, but super fascinating. There'll be a link to it on the description of this YouTube thing. So yeah, but it's funny and interesting how he's given it. He's giving it, so he's probably got a little bit of denial going on. He's still probably a little bit in that, court lawyer talk where he's sort of trying to be honest, but he's also probably dodging around things a bit. But, this is the interview I wrote it on, so be it. Yeah, so how about we get into the PurpleZain groups, the Lamb and the Beast EP, and I'll go for the lyrics and I'll explain a little bit of what's going on. And I hope you enjoy it. So let's go. Also, and one other thing too, I am being a bit self-indulgent. I'm doing my own podcast about my own song, but I thought, hey, why not? I might as well wear myself my PurpleZain Group shirt that I really love. I'm super proud of, so that's why I'm wearing it. Check this out. It's sort of designed off like those bad Eminem and bad Mike Tyson airbrush shirts you buy in Bali and so on. So a little bit of self-promotion. Even put on the PurpleZain pink hat. What do you think? We've got some gigs coming up. December 6th at Rattlesnake and Cooley, and December 14 in the main street of Tweed Heads for the council Christmas party. So I don't know how we got that gig. Oh my God, I'm going to have to change some of the lyrics. This song's about trying to murder someone's wife, so I'm sure that's going to go down a treat. I'm sure that's going to go down a treat at the Christmas party. But anyway, kids, you got to learn somehow, right? All right. The Lamb and the Beast by the PurpleZain Group. Lyrical Wax Podcast, episode 11. Let's go. Track 1 of the 4-track EP is called Faith. And track 1 sung very, very, very well by Ms. Jodie Maloney. So thank you very much, Jodie, for singing that. It's really good. I sort of wrote the lyrics, but, we sort of worked together on getting the melody and all that right. And she even spent her own money to go up and see recording Maestro Govinda Doyle to record it really, really well. So, yeah, good on her. Thanks for that, heaps. The opening lines, here we go. Also, this is a bit weird because I normally interview people about doing the Lyrical Wax podcast, and it's a bit more easy, but I'm sort of trying to interview myself and talk to you and read the lyrics. So it's a little bit weird for me. So hopefully it's not too weird for you. But anyway, let's go. So it opens with, have you ever had all that you want? Fortune, fame, wife and kids, kick-ass home, Jeep out the front. There's a little bit of a reference to that Jeep line, but I'll bring that up later. And have you ever lost all that you had, traded freedom and fans for a trenbolone shot? So what is trenbolone? Trenbolone was the steroids he was injecting, and that's going to be a big part of this story about his downfall. If you're familiar with Tim Lambesis, he was a very thick-set, muscly bound monster of a man. And yeah, surprise, surprise, it's a bit of a spoiler, but he was boosting so many steroids. And one of the main ones he was doing was trenbolone. So there you go. Now you can sing along to that if you're confused what that word was. And Yeah, he actually had everything he wanted. He had a very beautiful wife. They adopted 3 children from Ethiopia, a son in 2009, 2 girls in 2011. So, yeah, when this sort of went down, the kids would have been pretty young. They only would have been like 5 or 3 or so. So, yeah. But yeah, he had everything right. He had a hugely successful band. He had a beautiful wife. He had adopted kids. And he traded it all away for steroids. He wasn't really aware he was doing it, but he did. The chorus. Well, that's when you'll learn God doesn't exist. But no morals, no quarrels with the flick of the wrist. Because you're smarter these days. It's as clear as a bell. Nothing can stop you if there's no place called hell. So a big part of Lambesis' downfall was when he actually lost his faith in God. He was a very goody two-shoes Christian right from the start. Like when he was still in school, he'd go down to Mexico with his church and they'd help build orphanages and stuff. And that's to a certain degree why he adopted children, because of, getting really attached to these poor orphans and so on. But yes, he lost his faith. And this is one of the real key components of what sort of happened to him. So in the Alternative Press interview, he talks about he was studying, like when he was touring on the road, he was also sort of doing uni by correspondence, studying philosophy, because he thought if I study philosophy, it'll help me be a better communicator to people. It'll help me grasp human nature better, and it'll just help me understand Christianity and help me explain Christianity to better. But it sort of backfired, because when he went on the road, he couldn't study the philosophy course he wanted to study by distance education. So he switched to religious studies, what made sense because he could study that. But when he returned to studying Christian studies, he was like, hang on, this Christian stuff makes no sense compared to the philosophy that I've been studying. So he was evangelical, but it just wasn't making any sense to him anymore, the religious stuff. So this is actually a quote from the interview. The first time I cheated on my wife, my interpretation of morality was now convenient for me. I felt less guilty if I decided, well, marriage isn't a real thing because Christianity isn't real. God isn't real. Therefore, marriage is just a stupid piece of paper with the government. I thought of myself as super scholarly at the time. My academic pursuits has led me to this. I interpreted the evidence how I wanted and felt it was intellectually dishonest to consider myself a Christian. So that's how he lost his faith. And if you go back to the lyrics, well, that's when you'll learn God doesn't exist, because he literally learned God didn't exist. But no morals, no quarrels with a flick of the wrist. So if there's no Christian morality, what does any of this matter? What does marriage matter? You're smarter these days, as clear as a bell. Well, he's been studying. He's a lot more smarter. And nothing can stop you if there's no place called hell. So if there was no God, that means there's no morals. That means there's no risk of well, I think you know what I'm trying to say. He's not going to go to hell. So sweet, I can do whatever I want. So verse 2. So this is actually a reference to him studying. Have you ever tried to better yourself, but you read the wrong books? The 4 horsemen is all it took. So he read the wrong book. So what that means is that he was studying the 4 horsemen of the atheist apocalypse. So that's Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Daniel Dennett. Okay, so again, he read the wrong books, the 4 horsemen. But there's I like to make a few little biblical references in this as well, because it's, that's sort of part of the theme. So, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the 4 horsemen of the atheist apocalypse, and that's who he was reading. Verse 2 continued. Now the kids want to pray, but you don't say it out loud. Just a hand on their shoulder and milk that cash cow. So this was actually one of my favorite bits of the interview too, one of the more interesting bits. Lambesis talked about being on huge Christian music festival tours. And a lot of the other bands, he said, weren't actually Christian either, but they were just effectively grifting off the audience. So even though he'd lost his faith, Christian metal and Christian hardcore was huge back then, and there were these huge, big American tours. And As I Lay Dying were like, one of the big poster childs. They were one of the biggest and the best of that genre. So they were like one of the serious headliners, and they were getting paid serious money to go on these tours, but they weren't actually Christians anymore. And this is a quote from the interview. "We toured with more Christian bands who weren't actually Christians. In 12 years of touring with As I Lay Dying, I would say maybe 1 in 10 Christian bands we toured with were actually Christian bands. I actually wasn't the first guy in As I Lay Dying to stop being a Christian. In fact, I think I was the third. The two who remained kind of stopped talking about it, and then I'm pretty sure they dropped it too." So he just threw his bandmates under the bus, got on him, the tour bus, so to speak. "We talked about whether to keep taking money from the Christian market. We had this bizarre noble thing like, well, we're not passing along any bad ideas. We're just singing about real life stuff. Those kids need to hear about real life because they live in a bubble." So again, they're justifying their actions. And this is also that line from verse 2. "Now the kids want to pray, but you don't say it aloud. Just a hand on their shoulder and milk the cash cow." So this is from the interview. "When the kids will want to pray for us after shows, I'd be like, go ahead and pray. I'll just let them pray. And I'd say, amen. If praying while I have my hand on their shoulders makes them feel better, I didn't want to take that away from them. When they would specifically ask me to pray for something, I'd say, I don't like to pray out loud, but I'll take that with me to the bus." So that's directly out of the interview from AP magazine. So yes, chorus again, what I've already gone over. The bridge of part 1. "Who would have thought $500,000 ain't enough? Who would have thought a Grammy nomination would leave me with nothing left?" So Nothing Left was the song they got nominated for a Grammy for. "Yeah, I might have spent too long at the gym and maybe once fell asleep watching the kids. I worked my ass off to achieve all of this. Keep it under your lid. And for the record, the tattoos came free with the fans. Don't try to pin that shit on me. I'm an atheist, not a Satanist." So those lyrics are taken from a lot of the complaints ex-wife made in the divorce papers. So that first bit, "Who would have thought $500,000 ain't enough?" So in the interview, he talks about he had pretty much $500,000 saved to buy a house. And, there was his wife and him was sort of wanting him to tour less. And he was pretty much set up to buy them a house, and he could just be more of a studio sort of guy and spend more time with the kids. But he sort of deflected onto her that she found a house worth $750,000. So the $500,000 for a house wasn't enough. So it just meant that, well, hang on, wasn't I going to stop touring and, just be more of a stay-at-home dad and have this house? But he's sort of saying, but that wasn't enough. I want this $750,000 house. So in the interviews, he said, that's when I realized we'd both changed so much and we're just in different ways and become different. We'd been different people. Yeah. The Grammy nomination for Nothing Left, that's also kind of a little bit ironic too, so I like to keep that in. So yeah, I might have spent too long at the gym and maybe I once falling asleep watching the kids. He was pumping heaps of iron, and we'll get to the steroid stuff a little bit later. But yeah, he was just running his own show. He'd lost his faith. He was just pretty much being a total arsehole and a shit husband and father. He did, apparently fall asleep watching the kids one day when they're playing by the pool. I don't know, maybe some dads have done that. It doesn't really sound too good on paper in the divorce papers though, does it? And for the records, the tattoos came free with the fans. Don't pin that shit on me. I'm an atheist, not a Satanist. Well, the first bit is she was trying to say he was wasting all his money on tattoos and fancy vehicles. So that's actually the line at the very start about, having a kick-ass Jeep out the front. But yeah, he was going, in the divorce papers, she's just trying to pin me with everything, wasting my money on tattoos. But, he was like, no, I'd be on tour and the fans would be giving me tattoos. The line, don't pin that shit on me, I'm an atheist, not a Satanist. So that's kind of taken a little bit of a different part of the interview and a bit of part of his life. He had a side project band called PurpleZain, and he was accused of having satanic lyrics. So this, this side project band, this is sort of a bit about when he was, no longer Christian. He's probably, I don't know too much about this band, to be honest. I probably should have looked it up a little bit more. But yeah, he was sort of accused of some non-Christian lyrics, so satanic lyrics. But, I took a little bit of poetic license with it. No, I'm not a Satanist. I'm an atheist, not a Satanist. But it is relevant to that side project band and to a certain degree what was going on in his divorce. And just the outro of part 1. Now I do what I want. Spare me the lecture. Escape the witch hunt. So yeah, she was coming after him and he was just in denial and just being a total prick. And he was just doing what he wanted because he just knew he could, because there was no hell. There was no morality left in his life anymore. So yes, part 1, faith. Okay, so part 2. Part 2 is called steroids, because this is pretty much just about him pumping his arm full of steroids. There's not actually, there's not really any real lyrics in part 2, but so it's sort of panned out because, I listen to a lot of like sort of heavy synthwave sort of music, like I love Carpenter Brut, I love Perturbator, and they write a lot of concept albums that are like heavily instrumental, so they're almost like soundtrack concept albums. So when I wrote this song, I sort of had this part. I wanted to have an extended instrumental part, I suppose what I'm saying. I actually wrote this song, the music to this song, part 1 and 2, I actually wrote a long time ago, and I performed it actually. It was sort of a reinvention of one of my old band songs, an old Chevron Whores song, my old band, the Chevron Whores, if anyone remembers them. The lyrics and the melody were totally rewritten. But part 2, I didn't want to write lyrics for it because I wanted just to have a nice extended instrumental part like my synthwave heroes I was listening to. The only lyrics in it, you can hear me sort of saying, keep pumping, keep pumping, keep pumping, keep pumping. Because, that's what he's doing. He's just booting himself full of steroids and he's just pumping iron. So, yeah, that's it. But to be quite honest, too, I think that the music does lend itself to working out. It's pretty sort of marching. So, yeah, it works. In the interview, he does talk about how much drugs he was doing, but I'm not really going to get into that. Okay. So, part 3, arrest. Obviously, about when he gets arrested. He talks in very clear detail in the AP Mag interview about, what was leading up to his arrest and the things that were going on for him leading up to his arrest, and actually what happened during the arrest. So again, another good reason to read the interview if you are interested. But I also sing about it, and I'm going to talk about it here. So part 3 of the arrest starts like this. So I called up, we broke up, and we took it to the courts. But it looked like I'd lose the kids, get smashed by child support. So he did actually break up with his wife over the phone. He talks about it in the interview. So here we go. I sort of have to probably read this to get it right. But this is in the interview. So he said, I was on tour and he was sort of talking to her and they knew things weren't going too well. He was talking to his wife over the phone. His wife knew that things weren't right. She knew something was wrong. And he said, I'm going to be home in a few days. I want to talk to you when I get home. I should probably add too, he was having lots of affairs and all that sort of stuff as well, and just totally running amok. So yeah, he goes, I'll be home in 3 days. I really want to talk about this when I get home. I didn't want to talk about it over the phone. And she kept kind of like a Gandhi hunger strike. I'm not going to sleep until I know what's going on with this. I didn't want her to endure any more pain. I didn't want her to stay up all night. I would have rather told her in person, but I said, I don't love you the way you love me. I want you to be able to go forward in life and be happy. I want you to be with somebody who really loves you. I had an illusion that I was doing the noble thing. I separated from her over the phone. So again, not just some girlfriend of a couple of months. This is his wife of several years that they share a few kids with. He did sort of make allusions to the fact that a lot of people accuse him of trying to kill his wife because of he was going to lose heaps of money through child support and everything. And look, to be honest, I reckon that's a bit of denial. This is just my personal opinion. But yeah, of course, he was going to get smashed. He was just running amok, having an affair, doing all this bad stuff. She was going to absolutely take him to the cleaners. So there's no doubt that he would have been worried about losing a lot of money. The lyrics continue. Then my buddy at the gym said, I need another plan. He said he knew someone who'd help me. Brett Kimball was my man. So here we go. Brett Kimball, a central figure in all of this. Brett Kimball was the guy selling the steroids. And Brett Kimball was the guy who introduced him to the undercover cop. Lambisa says he never, ever found out why Brett Kimball set him up. Lambisa knew that Brett Kimball was, there was bikies looking for him. He was probably, he was, selling steroids and other drugs. So he would have been in a lot of trouble. Lambisa is pretty much aware he was in trouble with the bad people like the bikies and so on, but he was in trouble with like the law, police. He had a lot of people after him. And he did get moved. Lambisa knows that he did sort of get moved into sort of another state and relocated and stuff. So Lambisa thinks that the fact that he got set up was some kind of plea situation for Kimball. But what Lambisa never found out was why did he get targeted? Because, Lambisa wasn't actually a big dealer himself. He wasn't a gangster himself. He was just a guy who was buying heaps of steroids but had this desire to get his wife killed. But why would that have helped Brett Kimball's plea deal? And it's like only the police and Kimball know that. But again, because I think it was a bit of a plea deal and a bit of a witness protection or relocation thing, it's never come out in public forum. There was a lot that was retracted from his statement, apparently. So here we go. Well, Kimball, the dealer who was flicking all the roids, he had a contact, a hitman. I was curious but buoyed. So I said I'd like to meet him just to hear what he would say. Well, that's when I met Red and what spelt the end of days. So, end of days is a bit of a biblical reference. And when he met Red, that was sort of the end of it. So also during this interview, like I said at the start, Lambisa's probably in a little bit of denial and was probably a bit guarded about what he was telling AP magazine because, he was awaiting sentencing and there was probably only a lot of half-truths in his stories. He said he only wanted to meet the hitman because he sounded like the hitman was an interesting character, be a really interesting person to meet, not because he actually wanted to kill his wife. So, the lyrics, I said I'd like to meet him just to hear what he would say. Well, that's when I met Red and was spelt the end of days. So lyrics go on. Red said he could do it. He could clean up all my mess. Give me $1,000 up front, a photo and address. So I added the gate code so he wouldn't have to jump the fence. I didn't want my kids to see the man who deal my wife her repentance. In the lyrics, I say it, repentance, because it sort of rhymes better and I have pronunciation problems at times. But the line is, I didn't want my kids to see the man who deal my wife her repentance. So one of the most damning bits of evidence in the trial was, he had to give Red, the deposit of $1,000 and the address and everything. That was pretty much confirmation that he wanted it done. But he also wrote the gate code on the address. What was even further damning evidence. It's pretty much allowing the guy in, not giving the guy just an opportunity to scope. And he said in the interview, the reason why he gave Red the gate code is that he wanted Red to be able to scope the house really secretively, not like jump over the fence like this big hulking, scary looking man. And he didn't want his kids to see there's a chance that his kids would see this big hulking man jump the fence. So that's why he gave him the gate code. So, yes, it's very interesting. Oh, I just can't take it. The lies and the games. I was fed up and jacked up and sick of the blame. But when you're painted in a corner and there is no afterlife, there's no other option than to fucking kill my wife. So that's all pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? He was painted in a corner. He couldn't see his kids. His wife was holding all the cards in the divorce. He was doing all the bad stuff, and she was virtually refusing him to have any access, and even his parents to have any access. And he talks in the interview, he got really, really upset when his wife started preventing his parents from getting access as well, saying they were bad people. And look, admittedly, you could understand that would be upsetting to hear that because his parents probably had nothing to do with it. But it's not really an excuse, don't get me wrong. But he was definitely painted in a corner and he definitely felt he had no other options. He said he was going to social workers and lawyers, but none of them were able to help him. So that's why there's no other option to kill your wife. We all know that's totally not true. But I suppose one thing, like the jacked up line relates to this, and I haven't really touched on. He does talk about in the interview that the steroids really, really screwed with his head, and definitely not an excuse. And he even himself says it's not an excuse, but he said, and it is in a sense kind of understandable. Like people who have really bad drug problems might sort of say, "Oh, I was just so screwed up in drugs and alcohol. I was doing these dumb things, and it's not excusable, and I'm really sorry for it. But yeah, I was totally screwed up, and I wasn't thinking right." He does talk about that in the interview, and 100%, I'm definitely not making an excuse for him either. But the fact he was so jacked up, and different drugs affect people differently. We all know people that, lots of people can handle a drink, but there are some people that just cannot handle the drink. And when it comes to these steroids and stuff, it would have definitely screwed with his head. I'm not here to say it wouldn't, because, drugs do screw with people's heads, but definitely not an excuse. And it definitely wasn't, it didn't keep him out of jail. It literally wasn't a get out of jail card for him. So there's the next verse of part 3, and this is all quite literal. I met him at the Barnes & Noble and passed on the contraband. So when he met him at the Barnes & Noble in like sort of just outside of San Diego was where he met Red, and he gave him the contraband. He gave him the address and the deposit and everything. I met him at the Barnes & Noble, passed on the contraband, but he kept asking me to spell out the fucking plan. I thought, is this man stupid? So I told him nice and straight, I want my wife underground. I want a heart on a plate. So yeah, the arrest went down on May the 7th, 2013. So Red was asking him, what do you want me to do? And he'd be like, I want it gone. Like, what do you want me to do? I want it gone. And he was just thinking, is this man stupid? I'm giving him the money. We've had this conversation, totally unaware that he's getting set up, to have everything heard on the wire. And so Red's like, to be clear, do you want your wife dead? And he answered, yes, to answer your question specifically, that's what I want. And that's when he got done. That was the end. That was the end of days. So the last kind of chorus of part 3 that me and Jody sing together. Back in my car, thought I put it to bed. Then I hear a loud shout, feel a gun to my head. Little did I know I just paid off a cop. They threw me in the paddy wagon and I felt my bubble pop. So yeah, he got done. He got arrested in the car park of the Barnes & Noble. Well, I didn't plead insanity, but I'd gone batshit insane. I'd been off the wall for so damn long, I'd gone and fried my brain. Entrapment was no defense, so guilty was the plea. 6 long years of tears and fears in state penitentiary. So from the interview, it sort of sounds kind of like a funny entrapment sort of thing. But from the interview, his initial plea was, I'm not guilty because I was convinced it was a textbook case of entrapment. I admit in my heart as a human being I was guilty because my heart was capable of going there. But in the court of law, I firmly believed I was innocent. What I found is that there's no such thing as an entrapment defense. It's like a myth and a unicorn. So yes, he did. It's weird, he got set up by this Brett Kimball guy. So Kimball could give up some people for his own plea deal, but entrapment just did not exist. So he got sentenced to, I think it was 2014 when all the sentencing went through. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but he only served 2.5 years and he was released on parole on 2016. And the very final lines of part 3, but God don't exist. God don't exist. God don't exist. God don't. So there you go, a little bit of full circle there where he morality has come back to bite him in the ass really bad. But God doesn't exist. How can this be going wrong? How can this be happening? There's no morals, there's no quarrels. And then the final line, God don't. Please, God, don't do this to me. So, yeah, look, I mean, I know I wrote it, but I quite like it, I have to say. Okay, so part 4. Part 4 is called Prison because he's in prison. Part 4, the end of the story, the center to madness has finally arrived. The lyrics. The worst comes down in hell. The worst comes down in hell and prison. The worst comes down in hell. The worst comes down in hell and prison and public. So the lyrics kind of speak for themselves. Like all come downs are bad. Anyone's ever had a hangover, that's a come down, isn't it? But like he was doing a ton, like liters, maybe not liters, but he was doing a shitload of steroids. And the come down from that, all his testosterone levels, everything just went totally out of whack because he had to go fucking cold turkey. It was actually fucking quite dangerous, I'd imagine. So he's forced to come down but also, he's also forced to deal with everything that's happened. He has to deal with the realization that he's been arrested and he's locked up in a prison and he's never going to see his kids again. That was part of the sentencing. He could never see his kids again. And his parents had to give up seeing the kids as well, what would have just stung. And he's a public figure. He's a goody two-shoes Christian public figure who was admired and looked up to as a poster child for being, hardcore and tough and big and muscly and have tattoos, but also be just morally pious. And that bubble just burst big time, big time. So yeah, all the end of the song is it's sort of a bit of a jam out, and there's some really, I do have to say, all the lyrics that are getting thrown over the top. So I asked every member of the PurpleZain group, Kurt, Jody, Dick, and Noodles, to all just do some ad libs over the top, just to really make it real fun and give everyone a chance to have a go. Jody had a big part already at the start, so she just sort of did some oohs and ahs. They do sound really nice. Kurt threw a few out there. Noodles had some really good, funny. Noodles really ran with it and just had some really good, funny lines. And they're just all dropped in one go too. It was great. So I actually, when I was mixing it, Noodles' lines were supposed to be in the background. But they were so good and so funny. I actually cranked them up and made them a bit more of a feature. My wife is alone with the kids and I don't want to be here alone in the shower today. But I did ask Dickless to do a big preacher sermon at the end. He's just got that brilliant preacher sermon voice. And I thought, this will just be perfect. A Dickless preacher sermon at the very end. It'll just be so a fitting way to finish this song, finish the EP. And he went to his car and he sat in his car for half an hour when we were at the studio and he wrote it all down. And then he came back probably about half an hour later and spat it out. That was just great. So yes, that's the story of the Lamb and the Beast. The downfall of Tim Lambesis. He is back. It really actually spins me out that, he sort of talked about all the band members just obviously hating on him, and that's totally understandable that they all hated on him and stuff. But then when he came back, I don't know what the go is with these band members. This isn't about them, and I don't know anything about them, and it's a bit hard to judge when you don't know them. But he put As I Lie Dying back together, and the only reason why I can think they did that was for the money. I mean, people can be forgiven and given a second chance. Look, I understand that, but what he did was so full on and so heinous and so morally corrupt. Look, if that, yes, I know they would have been making a lot of money. But I could not think of any reason to getting back into a band with that guy. Like, I don't know, you have to, again, I don't want to assume too much. A lot of this stuff is based on things that Lambesis has actually said himself in this interview, but yeah, it tripped me out. But then like recently, he's sort of been back in the music news because, all the band members left again and Quite a few of the original band members that came back left again. And then now that what's going down with his wife, or his new wife from the start, I don't know. I don't know much about this. I don't think much of this guy. So, yeah. Tell me what you think. Give me your feedback. I'd be interested to hear it. I personally myself, I don't like trolling. I don't think it's kind of like a form of bullying, isn't it? And as a psychologist, it's not something I think is a good aspect of humanity, and it doesn't reflect well on someone's personality, being a troll. It's a cheap laugh, mocking someone for your own gain. But this is just such an interesting story, and it's a true story. And people write books and stories about, people's downfalls and stuff. There's lots of movies about Hitler. No one likes Hitler, and but there's still lots of movies explaining. There's a movie called Downfall about Hitler in his last days in the bunker and so on. And look, I will give you some credit, Lambesis. You're probably not as bad as Hitler. Okay, if you do hear this. So yes, but it was just such an incredibly interesting story, and I read it years ago, and I always planned on maybe making it into a recording. And I've done a few rock opera albums that are like sort of 10, 11, 12 songs or whatever. And I'd sort of planned maybe doing it for this one. But with the way of music nowadays, getting people to listen to a full 12-track album and the amount of work that goes into it, I sort of had this outline of a song, and it was only a 12-minute song. And I knew it was in sort of like 4 parts. So I thought, oh, there you go. I'll make it an EP and get it out. So there it is. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I'm not interviewing someone, so I don't really know how to wrap it up. I always give the people listening to these interviews an opportunity to plug gigs and so on. So yeah, I suppose it's a way I can finish it. 6th of December, we're playing at Rattlesnake in Coolangatta with my good mates Jono Mate Sheep and a couple other bands. And on the 14th of December, we're playing a free show in the main street of Bay Street for the Bay Street sort of council-funded Christmas party. So come and have a listen to me sing a song about attempted murder of someone's wife. What's a lovely Christmas theme song for everyone to enjoy. I'd like to bring the Lyrical Wax podcast back now that I'm not working full time, so to speak, anymore. I'm not chewing up heaps of my time working at the hospital anymore. So hopefully there'll be more Lyrical Wax in the future. If you want to put some bands forward to who you'd like, who you really like as a lyricist and you really like their music, maybe put them forward to me and I'll reach out, because I do have a little bit more time in my hands these days, free to do this sort of stuff. Put it under the chill psychology umbrella too, because it is a little bit psychologically informative. I'd like to think I didn't really go into too many psychological principles of this story, so to speak. But yeah, I'd like to be doing some more Lyrical Wax episodes into the future. So let's see what comes from it then. But otherwise, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Hopefully I'll see you at a couple of these gigs. Peace. You.
It's the